They gave me a solitary table in the corner at the most exclusive restaurant in the city, hoping to make me disappear. Instead, I made them pay a price they'd never forget. The air in Le Ciel was thick with the scent of money and roasted duck. It was the kind of place my husband Mark's family adored, understated elegance that screamed its price tag in quiet, tasteful whispers. Polished mahogany, crystal glasses that chimed with a musical clarity, and waiters who moved with the silent, predatory grace of jungle cats. We were there for my mother-in-law Eleanor's 60th birthday, an event she had been planning with the strategic precision of a military general for the better part of a year. I'd spent a week picking out the perfect dress, a deep emerald silk that Mark said made my eyes look like jewels. I felt confident, elegant, and for a fleeting, foolish moment, like I might finally belong. Mark squeezed my hand as we were led by the maitre d' toward a private dining room at the back. "Ready for the lion's den?" he whispered, a nervous tremor in his laugh. I smiled back, a little too brightly. "Always." His family had never been my biggest fans. To them, I was the scholarship kid who had somehow tricked their golden boy son into marriage, a temporary blemish on their pristine family portrait. For 5 years, I had endured the backhanded compliments, the thinly veiled insults about my humble upbringing, and the constant suffocating judgment. But tonight was supposed to be different. Mark had sworn they were making an effort. We stepped into the room, and my breath caught in my throat. A long, magnificent table was set for 12, gleaming under a low-hanging chandelier. Each place setting was marked with a delicate calligraphed name card. Mark's father, Richard, was already holding court at the head of the table, his brother and his perfectly manicured wife beside him. Mark's sister, Chloe, gave me a look that could curdle milk before turning back to her phone. And at the other end, on a veritable throne, sat Queen Eleanor herself, basking in the glow of her own importance. Mark let go of my hand and moved forward to kiss his mother's cheek. I followed a step behind, my smile feeling stiff on my face. "Eleanor, you look stunning." "Happy birthday," I said, holding out the gift bag with the vintage Chanel scarf I'd spent 2 months saving for. She took it without looking at me, passing it to Chloe as if it were a contaminated object. "Thank you, dear," she said, her voice dripping with syrupy condescension. "Mark, darling, your seat is right here, next to me. Richard, move Chloe down one, would you?" They all shuffled around obediently. I stood there waiting, my gift bag now sitting awkwardly on a side table. I scanned the name cards again. Richard, Patricia, Mark, Eleanor, Uncle Robert, Aunt Carol. My name wasn't there. There was no seat for me. A cold knot of dread began to form in my stomach. I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't seem to have a seat." Eleanor gave me a pained, pitying smile, the kind one might give to a child who has just asked a deeply stupid question. "Oh, sweetie," she cooed, her voice loud enough for the entire table to hear. "Of course you do. We just thought, well, this celebration is a very intimate, special moment, so the main table is for family only." The word hung in the air. Family. A word that, after 5 years of marriage to her son, apparently did not include me. My eyes darted to Mark, pleading with him to say something, to do something. He just stood there, wringing his hands, a look of pathetic apology on his face. "Mom, we talked about this," he mumbled, so quietly I could barely hear him. "And we decided this was for the best," Richard boomed from the head of the table, not even bothering to look at me. "Keeps it clean, less fuss." Eleanor gestured with a perfectly manicured hand toward a dark corner of the room, near the swinging doors that led to the kitchen. Tucked away in the shadows was a tiny, wobbly-looking bistro table, set for one. "We had the staff set up a lovely little spot for you right over there," she said, her smile never faltering. "You'll have a wonderful view of the wall. Now, everyone, let's have champagne." The room erupted in cheerful agreement as a waiter popped a cork. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just an oversight, it was a declaration, a deliberate, calculated, and public humiliation. I was to be shunted to the side, literally put in a corner like a misbehaving toddler while they celebrated. I looked at Mark again. He wouldn't meet my gaze. "Honey," he whispered, finally stepping toward me. "It's just for one dinner. It's her 60th. Please, don't make a scene." Don't make a scene. The classic line. The words that had kept me silent through years of microaggressions and outright hostility. But this was different. This was a line drawn in the sand, and they had just pushed me firmly over it. I felt a strange calm settle over me, a chilling clarity. I looked at their smug, self-satisfied faces, already raising their glasses to toast, acting as if I had simply vanished. I thought about leaving. I thought about screaming. Then I looked at the little table in the corner, and a new, dangerous idea began to sprout in my mind. With a poise I didn't know I possessed, I turned away from my spineless husband. I walked over to the sad little table, pulled out the single chair, and sat down. The waiter, a young man with kind, confused eyes, scurried over. "Ma'am, can I get you something?" he stammered, clearly aware of the bizarre, cruel soap opera playing out before him. I gave him a brilliant, unwavering smile. I glanced over at the main table where Richard was loudly instructing the waiter to start them off with 3 seafood towers and their usual bottle of Chateau Margaux. Then I looked back at my own waiter. That's when I noticed it. My little table had its own menu, its own water carafe, its own solitary candle. It was an entirely separate entity, a separate tab. A slow, wicked grin spread across my face. They wanted to treat me like I wasn't part of the family? Fine, I wouldn't be. I'd be a customer. And I was about to become the most demanding, outrageously expensive customer this restaurant had ever seen. I picked up the heavy, leather-bound menu, my heart pounding with a thrilling, terrifying sense of purpose. My eyes scanned past the salads and went straight for the market price section. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The waiter's name tag said Leo. He looked like he was barely out of his teens, his eyes wide with a mixture of pity and terror. He probably thought I was about to burst into tears. I gave him a smile that felt sharp enough to cut glass. "Leo," I said, my voice smooth as cream, "I'm going to need your expert guidance tonight. I'm celebrating." His eyebrows shot up. "Oh, of course, ma'am. Celebrating what, may I ask?" I leaned in conspiratorially. "My freedom." His confusion deepened, but he was a professional. "Very good, ma'am. May I recommend a cocktail to start?" I waved a dismissive hand at the cocktail list. "No, I'm thinking something a bit more substantial. I'll start with the Osetra caviar, the largest portion you have, and a bottle of the Dom Perignon Rosé, the 2008, if you have it." Leo's pen froze mid-air. He swallowed hard. The largest portion of caviar alone was nearly $1,000. The champagne wasn't far behind. He glanced nervously toward the main table, where Richard was now laughing boisterously at one of his own jokes. "An excellent choice, ma'am," he stammered, before scurrying away toward the kitchen. The silence from the family table was now a tangible thing. I could feel their eyes on me, burning into the back of my head. I didn't turn around. I simply took out my phone, propped it up against the water carafe, and put on my noise-canceling earbuds. I scrolled idly through social media, projecting an aura of supreme, unbothered calm. A few minutes later, a different waiter, older and more distinguished. The sommelier approached my table with the champagne. He presented the bottle with a flourish, uncorking it with a soft, expensive-sounding sigh. He poured a small amount into my flute. I swirled it, inhaled its aroma, and took a delicate sip, nodding my approval. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Chloe's jaw drop. Soon after, Leo returned with a silver cart. On it was a magnificent display, a huge tin of glistening black pearls nestled in a bed of crushed ice, surrounded by tiny, perfectly crafted blinnies, creme fraiche, and chopped shallots. He served me with the reverence usually reserved for royalty. I ate slowly, savoring every single salty, buttery bite. I took my time, making a whole ceremony of it. By the time I was halfway through the caviar, I saw movement. It was Mark. He scurried over, his face a mask of frantic desperation. He leaned down, his voice a harsh whisper that sliced through the Debussy, playing in my earbuds. "What are you doing? Are you insane?" he hissed. I slowly removed one earbud. "I'm sorry." "What was that?" "I was just enjoying the appetizer you so graciously arranged for me." "This isn't funny. They're furious. My dad is going to have a heart attack when he sees the bill." I took a slow sip of champagne. "What bill?" "I'm quite sure this table is on a separate check. After all," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "I'm not family, remember? Now, if you don't mind, you're interrupting my meal. Please go back to your table before you make a scene." He stared at me, dumbfounded, as if he'd never seen me before. He opened his mouth, then closed it again and slunk back to the main table, defeated. The victory was so sweet, it was almost better than the caviar. Almost. When Leo returned to clear my plate, I was ready for round 2. "Leo, that was divine," I said, loud enough for the next table to hear. "For my next course, I'm feeling torn. Tell the chef to surprise me. Perhaps the Wagyu medium rare, and the seared foie gras. Oh, and the truffle risotto. Just a small portion, as a side. And let's pair that with a red. The sommelier will know what to do." Course after magnificent course arrived at my solitary table. I was a one-woman banquet. The sommelier and I became fast friends. He seemed thrilled to finally have a patron who appreciated his craft. With each new bottle he presented, I could feel the tension at the family table ratchet up another notch. They had fallen silent, their own celebration forgotten. Their entire focus was on me, the outcast in the corner, feasting like a Roman empress on the eve of battle. They weren't celebrating a birthday anymore. They were watching a train wreck in slow motion, one that they had set in motion. As I was delicately slicing into a perfect piece of A5 Wagyu, my eyes scanned the room. And then I saw him. Sitting at a prime table near the window was a man named Arthur Henderson. He was my father-in-law's biggest business rival, a shark in a Savile Row suit. Richard absolutely loathed him. They were currently locked in a bitter bidding war over a major commercial contract, and seeing him here was clearly putting a damper on Richard's evening. A wicked, beautiful, truly awful idea sparked in my mind. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about humiliation, a humiliation to match my own. I discreetly flagged down the maitre d'. I whispered a few words in his ear and pressed a crisp $100 bill into his hand. His eyes widened, but he nodded and moved with silent purpose across the dining room to Mr. Henderson's table. I watched as he leaned down and spoke. Henderson looked up, puzzled. Then his eyes found me. I gave him a small, polite smile and a subtle wave. The maitre d' gestured in my direction. At the family table, Richard's fork clattered onto his plate. He had seen the entire exchange, and the color was draining from his face. A look of pure, unadulterated horror began to dawn on his features as Arthur Henderson dabbed his lips with his napkin, stood up, and began walking directly toward my table. Arthur Henderson moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who owned every room he entered. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that crinkled at the corners but held a predatory glint. The family table watched his approach with the horrified stillness of a herd of deer staring down a wolf. Richard looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. His face had gone from pale to a blotchy, alarming shade of purple. Eleanor's perfect smile was frozen in a rictus of shock. "Good evening," Henderson said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone. He gestured to the empty chair at my small table. "May I?" "Please, Mr. Henderson," I said, my own voice steady and calm, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I do hope I'm not interrupting your dinner." Not at all, he replied, settling into the chair. The maitre d' mentioned you sent over a bottle of the 82 Lafite Rothschild, a very generous and very intriguing gesture. He looked from me to the main table, a slow smile spreading across his face as he took in the scene. He understood. He understood perfectly. I felt it was the least I could do, I said sweetly. I overheard you were celebrating a new deal. I thought it warranted a toast. My name is Amelia. I extended my hand. He took it, his grip firm. Arthur, a pleasure, Amelia, and you are correct. We just finalized the acquisition of the old downtown Port Authority building, a very profitable venture. I saw Richard physically flinch. The Port Authority contract, that was the one he'd been boasting about securing for months. Henderson had just announced in the most public way possible that my father-in-law had been thoroughly and completely beaten. How wonderful for you, I said, my eyes flicking over to Richard's thunderous face. You must be so proud. My father-in-law over there, Richard, I gestured vaguely with my wine glass, was so certain that contract was his. It's a shame. He was planning to name the West Wing after my mother-in-law for her birthday. Arthur let out a deep, rumbling laugh. Is that so? Well, you can tell Richard from me that he'll have to find another monument to his ego. Perhaps he can name a park bench after her. The insult, delivered so casually, landed like a physical blow. Patricia, my sister-in-law, gasped. Mark was staring at me, his mouth agape, a look of sheer disbelief on his face. He was seeing a side of me he never knew existed. The quiet, accommodating wife had been replaced by a strategic demolitions expert, and I was merrily planting explosives under the foundations of his family's pride. So, Amelia, Arthur continued, turning his full attention back to me, clearly enjoying the chaos he'd walked into. You seem to be having quite the celebration yourself, though you appear to be dining alone. I am, I confirmed cheerfully. It's a very exclusive party, a celebration of new beginnings. Would you care for some of this Wagyu? It's exquisite. For the next 20 minutes, Arthur and I chatted amiably. We talked about business, about travel, about fine wine. He was charming, intelligent, and treated me not as an appendage to my husband, but as a person in my own right. With every laugh we shared, with every toast we made, the atmosphere at the family table grew heavier and more toxic. They had wanted to make me invisible, but I had made myself the center of the universe. I had not only refused to be shamed, I had hijacked their entire evening and allied myself with their greatest enemy. Finally, Arthur looked at his watch. Well, Amelia, this has been a delightful surprise, but I must be getting back to my guests. Thank you again for the wine. It was a masterstroke. He stood up and I stood with him. He took my hand and in a gesture of pure, calculated showmanship, raised it to his lips and kissed my knuckles. If you ever find yourself in need of a new beginning, he said, his voice low and for my ears only, you have my card. He slipped a heavy, embossed business card into my palm. As he walked away, I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile before sinking back into my chair. The waiter, Leo, appeared at my elbow as if by magic. Will there be anything else, ma'am? Dessert? Coffee? I looked over at the family table. They were finally stirring, a flurry of angry whispers and furious gestures. Eleanor was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, whether from rage or humiliation. I couldn't tell. Richard was on his phone, likely screaming at his lawyer. Mark just looked broken. The birthday party was officially over. It was time for the grand finale. Just the check, Leo, I said, and please be so kind as to deliver it to the head of the table, to my father-in-law. He insisted on taking care of everything tonight. Leo's eyes widened in panic. But ma'am, your tab is separate. I know, I said, giving him a warm, reassuring smile. But it's his wife's birthday, a special occasion. I'm sure he won't mind. He's a very generous man. I placed another $100 bill on the table for Leo. For your trouble. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. He disappeared and returned a minute later with a small leather-bound bill folder. He walked the long walk from my corner to the head of the table. Every eye in the room followed him. He placed the folder gently on the polished wood in front of Richard, who had just hung up his phone. Your check, sir," Leo stammered. Richard glared at him, then snatched the folder. He flipped it open. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the clink of ice in a distant water glass. I watched his face, every micro-expression a symphony of destruction. His eyes scanned the impossibly long, itemized list. They widened. His jaw went slack. The blotchy purple of his face deepened to a terrifying maroon. He stared at the final number at the bottom of the page, a number that included multiple bottles of vintage wine, half an ounce of the world's most expensive caviar, and enough imported delicacies to feed a small village. A number just shy of $3,500. My number. My revenge. He slowly lifted his head, his eyes finding mine across the room. The look in them was not just anger, it was pure, unadulterated hatred. He slammed the folder shut, the sound cracking through the restaurant like a gunshot. "Mark," he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl that promised violence. "Get your wife, we're leaving, now!" Mark shot out of his chair as if he'd been electrocuted and started rushing toward me, his face pale with dread. But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at the bill folder still sitting on the table, and I noticed something I hadn't expected. The restaurant hadn't just put my charges on his bill, they had combined them. My extravagant feast was mixed in with their pathetic seafood towers and birthday cake. There was only one total, one monstrous sum. And that's when I realized the true genius of my plan wasn't just the money. It was the ambiguity. They couldn't prove which charges were mine without publicly admitting what they had done, without admitting they had stuck me in a corner like a dog. Richard was trapped. He would have to pay for it all. And as Mark reached my table, grabbing my arm with a panicked grip, my eyes met Richard's one last time. I just smiled, a slow, deliberate, satisfied smile, and for the first time all night, I laughed. My laugh was not a giggle or a chuckle. It was a full-throated, genuine, and utterly unrestrained sound of pure catharsis. It was the sound of 5 years of swallowed insults and bitten-back retorts finally breaking free. Mark's hand on my arm was like an iron clamp, his fingers digging into my silk dress. He practically dragged me from my chair, hissing my name through clenched teeth. I didn't resist. I floated out of the restaurant in his wake, my head held high, feeling the scorched earth silence I left behind me. The cool night air was a slap in the face, bringing me back from the giddy heights of my triumph. The valet brought Mark's sleek black Mercedes around, and he shoved me into the passenger seat before slamming the door. The moment he was behind the wheel, the facade of control shattered. He slammed his fist on the steering wheel, the sound echoing in the small, leather-scented space. "What have you done?" he roared, his voice cracking with a mixture of fury and fear. "Are you out of your mind, Amelia? $3,500. You humiliated my father. You ruined my mother's birthday." I waited, letting him vent, my expression unreadable. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. The woman staring back looked different, stronger. The emerald of my dress seemed to glow. When he finally ran out of steam, sputtering into a panicked silence, I turned to him. My voice was chillingly calm. "No, Mark," I said. "You're wrong. They ruined your mother's birthday when they decided to treat your wife like garbage. They humiliated themselves when they put me at a little table in the corner like a naughty child. All I did was refuse to play their game. It was just for one night," he pleaded, his anger deflating into a pathetic whine. "It was just a seating arrangement. You didn't have to go nuclear." "A seating arrangement?" I let out another laugh, this one short and sharp. "It was a statement, Mark. It was the culmination of 5 years of them telling me in 100 different ways that I don't belong. And tonight, you agreed with them. You stood there and let it happen. You told me not to make a scene." I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Well, this is the scene you get when you ask a woman to set herself on fire to keep you warm. I'm done burning." He stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time, and I could see the dawning horror in his eyes as he realized the woman he married was gone. What does that mean?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It means I'm not going home with you," I said simply. "Take me to the Fairmont Hotel downtown." He just gaped at me. "Take me to the hotel, Mark, or I'll get an Uber and you can explain to your father why my picture is on the front page of the Society columns tomorrow next to Arthur Henderson's." The threat, invoking his father's nemesis, worked. Without another word, he put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb, driving in a tense, suffocating silence. When we arrived at the hotel, he followed me into the lobby. "Amelia, please," he begged, grabbing my hand. "We can fix this. I'll talk to them. I'll make them apologize." I pulled my hand away gently. "No, you won't, Mark. You never have, and you never will. You're more afraid of them than you are of losing me. You proved that tonight." I checked in, the concierge giving us a curious look. As I was handed my key card, I turned to Mark one last time. "Pack a suitcase for me. My clothes, my laptop, my toiletries. Leave it with the doorman at our building. My lawyer will be in touch on Monday about the rest." His face crumpled. "Our building? Our lawyer? Amelia, don't do this." "It's already done," I said, my voice devoid of malice, filled only with a profound and unshakable finality. "You and your family wanted a dinner for family only. Well, congratulations. From now on, that's all you'll get." I turned and walked toward the elevators, not looking back. The ding of the elevator arriving sounded like the final bell of a prize fight I didn't even know I was in until the last round. The next morning, I woke up in a cloud of 1,000-thread-count sheets, the sun streaming through the panoramic window of my suite. For the first time in 5 years, I felt light. I ordered room service, and as I sipped my coffee, I pulled Arthur Henderson's business card from my clutch. I hesitated for only a moment before dialing his number. 3 months later, I was sitting in my own corner office, one with a floor-to-ceiling view of the city skyline. Arthur had been impressed not just by my nerve, but by the strategic mind behind it. He'd hired me as a consultant in his acquisitions department. My first major project? Overseeing the redevelopment of the downtown Port Authority building, the very contract Richard had lost. Every day, I went to work dismantling my former father-in-law's legacy, not out of spite, but because I was good at it. I was ruthless, I was creative, and I was finally valued for my mind, not my pedigree. Mark had sent dozens of texts, left tearful voicemails, even tried showing up at my new apartment. I blocked his number. His family, I heard through the grapevine, was imploding. The story of Eleanor's disastrous birthday party, complete with the tale of the rival CEO and the astronomical bill, had become a legend in their social circle. They were a laughingstock. One afternoon, a courier delivered a small velvet box to my office. Inside was the vintage Chanel scarf I had bought for Eleanor. There was no note. I didn't need one. It was a white flag, a pathetic attempt to rewind time. I looked at the beautiful, expensive piece of silk. Then I looked out at the city, at the cranes working on my project, at the life I was building for myself. I buzzed my assistant. "Sarah, would you come in here for a moment?" When she entered, I held out the box. "Happy Tuesday," I said with a smile. "I think this would look lovely on you." She gasped, her eyes wide. I can't accept this." "Of course you can," I said, closing the box and pressing it into her hands. "Some things, no matter how beautiful, just come with too much baggage." As she left, beaming, I leaned back in my chair, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. They had tried to put me at a small table in the corner, a place for the unimportant, the outsiders, and in a way they succeeded. I was in a corner office, at my own table. And finally, I was home.